Welcome to Becoming Archetype, where we explore the science and strategy of natural health optimization and performance so that you can achieve your ideal self. I am Dr. Ryan Sousley. 1 in 5 Americans has now used a GLP-1 drug. 1 in 5. And the clinical trial data, published peer-reviewed research, shows that 2/3 of those people will regain the weight within a year of stopping the medication. And they'll regain it faster than if they had lost the weight through diet and exercise alone. So listen, that's not a failure of the individual. That's a predictable physiological outcome of a drug that was never designed to fix the underlying problem. It was designed to override it. And here's what I mean. Think about a bodybuilder who injects testosterone. The muscles get bigger, they get stronger, and the results are for sure real while he's on the testosterone. But the side effect is that the body stops producing its own testosterone. So when he or she comes off of the drug, everything starts to fall apart. Natural production never fully recovers. So they feel like they can never stop taking it. And so that's exactly what the research is now showing what happens with GLP-1 drugs, providing synthetic GLP-1 at levels that are several times higher than your body would ever produce on its own may actually cause your body to produce less of it in the future and then become less sensitive to it, which means you got to keep taking the drug and more than likely you have to take more of it to get the same result. So the very system that the drug was trying to compensate for gets weaker, and now you need the drug more than ever. So listen, today I want to give you the full picture, what the research actually shows on GLP-1 drugs, what's driving the metabolic breakdown in the first place, which I think is the most important thing to understand so you can do something naturally about it. And then we're going to talk about what you can do to activate your body's own GLP-1 system naturally, because that's the good news. Your body already makes this stuff. We just got to figure out how to make more of it and make adequate levels. And we want to do that so that you don't have to destroy your muscle mass or commit to being on a medication that you can never stop. So here's where the conversation typically goes sideways. And it goes sideways right at the beginning because most people, including a lot of doctors out there, don't start with the right question. The right question is why? But the conventional model looks at someone who's overweight, who is struggling with blood sugar, who can't seem to lose weight no matter what they do, and then asks the question, well, what drug can we give this person in order to fix it? And the GLP-1 drugs are the current answer to that question. And they do produce real results. I'm not going to pretend like they don't. I mean, that's why they make billions and billions of dollars every year now. But they get you the results while you're on them, and the weight does come off. And for some people with severe metabolic disease, there may actually be a legitimate short-term role that these drugs play. So I want to be fair about that. But the question that nobody is asking is, why did the body stop regulating weight correctly in the first place? Because here's the thing, GLP-1 is not a drug. GLP-1 is a hormone, and your body makes it, and it's produced naturally in the lining of your stomach, your small intestine, every time you eat. So its job is to tell your brain that you're full. Helps your pancreas release insulin at the right time, also helps you slow digestion so that your blood sugar stays stable. And your body has this beautifully designed system for regulating weight and blood sugar, and GLP-1 is a central part of that system. But your body makes it naturally, so we got to figure out how to make more of it without having to take a drug that has these side effects and creates a dependency. So listen, you don't have an Ozempic deficiency. Your body produced GLP-1 just fine at some point in your life. So then something had to have happened upstream that disrupted that system. And the problem with the drug is that it never investigates the reason. Why did your body start malfunctioning? Why is there this dysfunction? And the drugs don't even try. They just introduce this synthetic version of a hormone at several times the concentration of what your body would ever produce naturally, and then forces that signal to go through. And so the alarm goes off, and the scale goes down, but the problem never gets solved. So listen to this. Between 15 and 60% of the weight loss in people that are taking a GLP-1 medication is not fat, it's lean muscle. The range does vary a little bit depending on whether you're doing resistance training and how fast you're losing weight. But even at 15%, if we're going to be conservative, if you lose 30 pounds, you've lost 4 to 5 pounds of your metabolic engine. So that'd be like going from a V8 to a V6 in your car. Because the thing is that your muscles burn calories at rest, kind of like if your car is just sitting there on in idle. It's burning gas, not a lot, but it's burning gas even without you driving anywhere. And so the bigger the engine, the more gas you burn at rest. And it's the same thing with muscle. So your muscle is like your metabolic engine. And so when you lose a bunch of weight, but a bunch of it is muscle, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And then when the weight comes back, what the research shows, which it does for most people, it's over 2/3 of people that stop the medication, the weight comes back. But when it does come back, it comes back as fat and not muscle. So you're actually heavier in fat and weaker in muscle than when you started. And so this is not a side effect. This is a predictable physiological outcome of overriding the system instead of actually fixing it. So now I want to talk about what is actually breaking down in your metabolism, because I think if you can understand the mechanism, then you can take agency over your own health and you can feel empowered to actually do something about it. So there are 3 primary root causes that I see driving metabolic dysfunction in my clinic. And before I get into these, I want to spend 2 minutes on what the research actually shows about the side effects, because there's a lot of noise online, and I want to give you the line between what's real and what isn't. So here's what's real and documented. The gastrointestinal side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, these are very common, very well documented. Clinical trials show nausea in anywhere from 2 to 20% of patients, depending on the dose. And for a lot of people, it's significant enough that half of the patients who are on a GLP-1 drug have so much discomfort that they feel like they have to stop taking the drug within the first year. And that's pretty remarkable for something that's being presented as a long-term solution to chronic disease treatment. I mean, if 1 in 5 people have to stop taking it because of the side effects, I mean, that's significant. Another side effect is pancreatitis. This is inflammation of the pancreas, and it's a documented risk. There was a study out of Washington University and the VA which confirmed this association between pancreatitis and GLP-1 drugs. It's not super common, but it is real. And so, if you're taking one of these drugs and you have severe abdominal pain while you're on it, you need to evaluate that quickly because you don't want pancreatitis to get out of control. And then this one's more recent, but it's still worth being aware of if you're considering or on a GLP-1 drug right now. But this was published just last month in the British Journal of Ophthalmology, and researchers analyzed over 30 million adverse event reports submitted by the FDA. And they found that Wegovy, which is the high-dose version used specifically for weight loss, was associated with nearly a 5-fold higher risk of ischemic optic neuropathy compared to Ozempic. So it's interrupted blood flow to the optic nerve that can cause sudden and even sometimes permanent vision loss. And then the risk was 3 times higher in men. It's not a proven causation yet, but it's still significant. And if you're on Wegovy or any GLP-1 for that matter, it's definitely a conversation worth having with your doctor. There's also been some chatter about thyroid cancer and the association with GLP-1 drugs. They've done a couple of large meta-analyses, including one that was published in December of 2025, covering nearly 95,000 different participants, and they found no meaningful increased risk in thyroid cancer in humans that were taking semaglutide. Most of the significant findings were found in rodent studies. But again, if there's even a chance, it's worth looking into. And again, I think the whole reason why I bring this up is I'm not here to be a fear monger. I'm not here to beat up medicine or to tell people to go home and throw away all their drugs. That's not my goal at all. But I think if you're listening to this show, more than likely, you would prefer to find a natural alternative, and you would prefer to find ways to get off of medications, because that means that your body's actually healthy and doesn't need them. And so part of that, I think, is being empowered with the real information. Because again, if all you do is listen to the news and watch commercials And social media, everyone would have you believe that GLP-1s are the miracle drug of the century. And they do produce results, but they also produce side effects. So I think you need to know about both. Okay, now I want to get into root causes. Root cause number one, and like I said, there are three that I primarily see in my clinic. Root cause number one is insulin resistance. And this is the most common driver that I see clinically. So here's what happens. Every time you eat, especially processed carbs or sugar, your body or your blood sugar goes up, right? And then your pancreas has to respond by producing more insulin because the insulin drives the sugar out of the blood and into the cells. And that's what gives you the quick energy. That's normal. That's healthy. That's how it's supposed to work. But when you're eating processed food 3 times a day, or you're snacking constantly, and then you're not exercising, so you're not actually burning all that energy that your body's pushing into the cells, your cells get exposed to so much insulin because insulin gets produced by the pancreas no matter what when you eat heavy carbs or processed food. But your cells get exposed to so much insulin so often that they start to not respond. And that's called insulin resistant. And when insulin stays chronically elevated, it sends one primary signal to your body, which is store fat. So you can eat less than you think you should and still gain weight, not because you lack willpower, but because the hormone environment in your body is stuck on storage mode instead of burn mode, right? Even if you're eating less and less calories. And this is where a lot of people get frustrated because they cut calories, they change their diet. But again, if your hormone balance is off and you've trained your body to be this way, well, you've got to do something to untrain it. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But it gets worse. When fat cells get overfull and dysfunctional, they actually start releasing inflammatory proteins that perpetuate the problem. Because the GLP-1 drugs blunt your appetite signal, it does not correct the cellular dysfunction that got you there. So that biology is still running underneath the surface. And that's one of the dangers of all medications, but especially GLP-1 drugs, is they produce the number on the scale that you want to see or the waistline that you want to see, but they don't fix the broken biology that's happening behind the scenes, which is why when you get off these drugs, typically most, if not all of the weight comes back and you're less healthy because you lose a lot of muscle on the process. Okay, root cause number 2, nervous system interference. And this is the one that I think is usually the most interesting to people because it's the one nobody talks about. And I think as a chiropractor and someone who sees this clinically all the time, I think this one changes everything about how you approach this problem. And so again, a little bit of physiology and anatomy. Your gut produces GLP-1 naturally, but your gut does not operate independently. It communicates with your brain continuously through this feedback loop. Your brain sends signals down the spinal cord, primarily through your vagus nerve out to the gut, and then your gut sends signals back to your brain, and it's this feedback loop in order to create balance and homeostasis. And so again, your vagus nerve that comes out of your neck, it controls digestion, it regulates inflammation, it governs satiety signaling, feeling of fullness after a meal. And so that nerve is quite literally the neurological line between your brain and your gut. It's how the communication happens. And the part that nobody talks about is the vagus nerve runs through your spine, just like just about every other nerve in your body does. But what that means is if you have a structural compromise in your neck or your upper back, cervical or thoracic spine, misalignments that develop over years, or postural breakdown, or degenerative disc disease, or arthritis, these breakdowns or these dysfunctions in your spine can actually degrade the integrity of the signal that's trying to get through the nervous system. And so it's not like a switch that gets flipped on or off necessarily. It's more like a cell phone signal with bad reception. So the message can still get through, but it's garbled and it's incomplete. And so your gut doesn't receive a clean signal to regulate digestion and release hormones the way that it should, which means you could eat a full meal, but the satiety message never actually arrives to your gut. Your brain just can't communicate clearly. And so you eat more. And so your blood sugar regulation suffers and digestive function suffers and you overeat. And then what makes this particularly tricky is that most of the time, this type of thing that can happen in your spine doesn't cause pain. And it's because only about 7 or 8% of the nerves in your body feel pain, even the nerves in your spine. And yet most people just assume they don't have a spine issue unless their back hurts, right? But you can have significant structural dysfunction in your spine that is directly compromising nervous system communication to your gut or elsewhere and not feel it. No back pain, no neck pain, no obvious symptoms, no headaches, just a metabolism that isn't working the way that it should. And so then you end up chasing that symptom, even though the problem is somewhere else, right? And this isn't a lot different than a cavity in your tooth. You know, a lot of times you don't feel the cavity in your tooth unless it gets really, really bad. Doesn't mean it's not there, which is why people should get checked. So this is why when someone comes to me in my clinic with metabolic dysfunction, the first thing that I look for, or the first thing that I evaluate, is their spine and nervous system. Not because weight loss is a chiropractic problem or because I'm a chiropractor and that's all I do. It's because your nervous system is the communication infrastructure for every metabolic process that we're talking about. So it has to be assessed before anything else makes sense, right? Like if your thermostat's broken in your house, you know, you can put more fans in there, you can turn on the AC, you can put a cold rag on your head, but until you fix the thermostat, the temperature is always going to be off and you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. Okay, the third root cause is toxic and nutritional load. So this driver is the cumulative burden of what we're putting into and onto our bodies on a regular basis that disrupts hormonal and metabolic function at the cellular level. So this would be things like processed seed oils like canola, soybean, vegetable oil. These are chemically extracted and then they oxidize rapidly and then they embed themselves into your cell membranes and then interfere with cell signaling. And then ultra processed foods, which has become, unfortunately, a staple in the standard American diet today. But ultra processed foods drive chronic low-grade inflammation, which disrupts the gut microbiome, like your good bacteria that live in your gut that help you break things down and help support your immune system. It's the same tissue that is responsible for producing GLP-1 naturally, your small intestine specifically. So nutritional deficiencies, they make a big difference. And it's not just about health and energy and maintaining muscle, but like, for example, protein intake, micronutrient status, omega-3, they directly affect how well your cells produce and respond to hormones. So the GLP-1 drugs don't address any of this. They just mute the alarm. They turn down the noise. They turn down the signal, but ultimately the fire just keeps burning, right? And so most people that I see have at least one, if not multiple, of these root causes all working synergistically against the person. And the reality is that there's no drug on the market that touches any of them, let alone all three. So I want to tell you about two patients. First patient's name is Diane, and she came to me about a year ago. She was in her late 50s. She'd been on Wegovy for almost a year, and she had lost about 30 pounds, and she felt really good. And then she started experiencing all these GI side effects, like nausea and bloating, digestive issues. And so her doctor told her, hey, let's take a break. And so she did. And then within 6 months, she'd gained back over 2/3 of the weight that she had lost. And so when she came to me, she came in because a friend had told her that there might be a different way to at least look at and approach the problem. And so we sat down and we went through a full history. And right away, there's a few things that stood out that I thought were significant. Number one, she had really bad forward head posture and she had lost the curve in her neck. And that's significant because that's where the vagus nerve passes through on its way to the gut. Her diet was also really heavily processed. She had never done any structured resistance training, so she didn't have a lot of muscle on her body. And then her blood sugar was completely unstable, shaky mid-morning, crashing after lunch, craving sugar by mid-afternoon, which is just classic insulin dysregulation. And so here's what we did. I put her on a corrective chiropractic plan to restore proper alignment in her spine and get things moving and aligned properly. And then at the same time, I built her a nutritional protocol around removing all the inflammatory inputs that we could. And then the diet plan was also intended to help stabilize her blood sugar through eating real food and practicing intermittent fasting, and really increased her protein intake, trying to get 30 grams of protein at every single meal. And so all of that combined with resistance training every single week, 6 months later, she was down 19 pounds. And so it was slower than when she was on the drug, but she had more muscle than when she started, not less. Her blood sugar was more stable than it had been for years, and she had normal digestion. And she never regained the weight because we didn't just cover up the signal. We found what was actually causing it and then corrected it through lifestyle modification and by removing the interference. Okay, second patient is a guy named Mark. He came in the early 50s, never been on a GLP-1 drug, but his doctor had just recommended it. And he had a BMI, body mass index, that qualified him for taking this drug. And he told me that he just wanted to try anything before going on the drug. And so we did a full evaluation. We started with the spine and nervous system. He had what's called thoracic kyphosis, which is rounding of the shoulders and the upper back, which produces forward head posture, puts a lot of strain and stress on the nerves and discs and joints in the neck and the upper back. And then we ran some extra functional tests as well. Insulin resistance markers were elevated. Inflammatory panel was super high. And his protein intake was about half of what it needed to be. And so we put him on a corrective care plan. We built a targeted nutritional protocol, got him strength training again. Guys, this isn't super complicated stuff, but it's just giving the body what it needs to produce health. And medications don't do that. Does that mean you should never take a medication? No, but medication is not something your body is deficient in. Therefore, taking it doesn't help your body produce more health. Exercise does that. Eating whole foods does that. Removing interference in your nervous system does that. Correcting your posture and, aligning your body to the way that it was created to be aligned and function. Those things produce health. And I don't think there's a single magic bullet. So it's not like, chiropractic fixes everything, or fixing your posture fixes everything, or just eating clean fixes everything. No, health is not a la carte. You've got to uncover as many of these stones as possible and address every angle so that you give your body the best chance to thrive and survive. And so we put Mark on this corrective plan, and at his 3-month reevaluation, he had lost 14 pounds. Fasting glucose had dropped into normal range, energy came back significantly, and he never had to go on the medication. Not because I told him not to, but it's just because we addressed the actual root causes of why his body was in a state of dysfunction, and his body responded the way that it's supposed to, by healing and by thriving. So listen, that's not magic. It's not woo-woo science. It's just physiology. So here's what I want you to walk away with. These are 3 things you can start doing right now. So action step number 1, protein at breakfast, 25 to 40 grams of high quality protein first thing in the morning. Eggs, meat, Greek yogurt, eat real food. This is the most impactful single dietary lever for activating your body's natural GLP-1 production. It also prevents mid-morning blood sugar crashes that are typically what cause people to crave carbs by like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. So it's such an easy thing to do. Just eat a bunch of protein first thing in the morning, right? Before you change anything else, just eat protein in the morning. Number 2, resistance training 3 days a week. Muscle is your metabolic engine. It's the most powerful natural activator of GLP-1. You just have to do it. So it's also what protects your lean muscle mass. Like if you are on this drug or you're losing weight, even naturally, the thing you got to be watching out for is that you're losing too much muscle. So you don't want to do that, right? So you just got to work out. I would recommend at least 3 days a week. It's not complicated. You don't need a really complex program. Just go lift heavy stuff multiple times a week. And that's it. Number 3, get your spine and nervous system checked. If your vagal pathway, if your nervous system is compromised by structural dysfunction, spinal subluxations, degenerative disc, arthritis, postural distortions, your gut will not be able to regulate hormones or digestion or satiety at full capacity. Doesn't mean it's going to shut off completely, but regardless of what you eat or how hard you train, this is the most overlooked piece of the metabolic picture for most people. And it's where I start with everybody. So from there, if you get that checked and everything's okay, then you can move on to functional lab testing, which We do that for patients too, but I think you got to start with the system that runs and controls it all. So, hey, if this episode was helpful to you, please share it. Share it with someone who's considering one of these drugs or someone who's on one and they're trying to figure out what's next. And if you haven't done so already, leave us a review. It takes 30 seconds, genuinely helps us reach more people. And I just really appreciate reading your thoughts and opinion. I'll talk to you next week.